World News in 5.
Right now.
News and developments making headlines around the world in 5 minutes. World News in 5. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Good day to all of our listeners here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. This is World News in 5 and I'm your host, Steph Vicente. The Pentagon says around 140 United States service members have been wounded since the start of the Iran war on February 28. According to BBC News, Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell said most of the injuries were minor, with 100 personnel, or 108 rather, personnel already returning to duty. However, 8 service members remain listed as severely injured and are receiving the highest level of medical care. Meanwhile, U.S. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt addressed a now-deleted social media post by Energy Secretary Chris Wright claiming the U.S. Navy had escorted an oil tanker through the Strait of Hormuz. Leavitt clarified that the U.S. Navy has not escorted any tanker through the strait and said she has not yet spoken with Wright about the post. The clarification comes as shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, the world's busiest oil shipping route, remains heavily disrupted amid the ongoing U.S.-Israeli war with Iran. In other news overseas, United States Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says the initial timeline for the U.S. war against Iran was 4 to 6 weeks, with the goal of destroying Iran's missiles and naval capabilities, dismantling its nuclear program, and eliminating its regional proxies. The BBC reports Leavitt mentioned in a White House briefing that the operation is currently ahead of schedule, echoing earlier remarks by U.S. President Donald Trump. The U.S. Press Secretary said the conflict will not end until Iran's complete and unconditional surrender, whether or not Tehran formally declares it. She added that President Trump will ultimately determine when Iran no longer poses a direct threat. Meanwhile, Leavitt said the recent rise in oil and gas prices is temporary and that the military operation could lead to lower fuel prices in the long run. She also confirmed that the U.S. military is preparing additional options to ensure the Strait of Hormuz remains open to global shipping. And finally, the United Nations says the deportation and forced transfer of Ukrainian children to Russia may constitute both a war crime and a crime against humanity. According to BBC News, a new report by the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine found that Russian authorities at the highest level, including Russian President Vladimir Putin, were involved in moving thousands of children from Russian-occupied areas of Ukraine. Ukrainian officials say nearly 20,000 children have been illegally taken to Russia and Belarus, while the UN has so far documented more than 1,200 cases since the year 2022. The report shows around 80% of those children have not yet been returned, with many parents still unaware of their whereabouts. Investigators say many of the children were taken from areas such as Donetsk and Luhansk and were later placed in Russian families or institutions and granted Russian citizenship. Moscow has denied the allegations, saying the children were rescued from a war zone. And that concludes today's edition of World News in 5. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, this has been Steph Vicente. Good day and stay safe, everyone.
World News in 5.
Right now.
News and developments making headlines around the world in 5 minutes. World News in 5. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.